Hello, everybody. Good morning, and you're welcome to yet another exciting edition of The Other Perspective. It's a weekly talk show brought to you by Alliance for Finance Monitoring, and The Other Perspective is a space where we always interrogate the thing behind the thing that is the thing. My name is Elizabeth Karunji, and I'll be your host for today. So before we get started, kindly subscribe to ACFIM's YouTube channel if you haven't yet, and also press the like button down below. You can also share this link with your friends to tune in and be part of this conversation. Today on the show, we look at Electoral Commission suspension of the Women's Council elections and its implications on Uganda's democracy. Before we begin, let me give you some context. In February of this year, the Electoral Commission issued a roadmap detailing the program for elections and to date has finalized a compilation of the village women registrars. However, the Electoral Commission issued a statement dated on the 24th of June this year, in which they announced the suspension of the electoral program for the women councils and committee elections for 2022, citing the unavailability of funds. The National Women's Council Act provides for a term of office of 4 years from the date of its inception, and the Schedule 2 reads as follows. Subject to this act, every Women Council and Women Committee shall remain in office for 4 years from the date of its inception, after which it shall automatically elapse and dissolve. As per this provision, we will soon not have women councils and committees because the 4-year term elapses this August of 2022. This also brings into the question of the legality of the decision by the Electoral Commission to postpone these elections. We know for a fact that it's not an emergency situation because the Electoral Commission and by extension the Ministry of Finance and Planning knew more than 2 years ago that this election would take place and should have planned and made resources available for this. These elections will cost at least 35 billion according to the Electoral Commission, but we do not have money for these elections. Neither do we have money for the enhancement of civil servant salaries, but we have the money for luxurious vehicles for the Speaker of Parliament and her deputy. We also have money for Operation Shujaa that's currently taking place in Congo, and we also have the money for the payment of 40 million to each member of parliament. And this questions whether as Uganda we're getting our priorities right. And joining me to discuss this today are two amazing panelists. And if you've been following the Other Perspective for a while, I'm pretty sure that you have seen their faces before. And our first panelist is a lady. She's called Priska Wanyenya. Miss Wanyenya is a parliamentary journalist, and we're so happy to have you on the show, Priska. I hope she's in. And then our second guest is Esero Abel. Esero is also no stranger to the show, and he's a youth in democracy activist. And I'm so excited to have you both on the show. And let's get right into today's questions. Abel, I'll begin with you. And I want you to tell our viewers, what does this mean in terms of planning on the government institutions that are mandated that these resources are available? I'm asking this because we knew 5 years ago that this election was supposed to happen. Who do you think has dropped the ball? Abel seems to be having network issues, and I'm going to forward this question to Priska. Priska, I hope you're on.
Yes, I am.
Yes. So, did you hear the question?
Now you kindly repeat it for me.
Yes. So, I want you to tell us, what does this mean in terms of planning on the government institutions that are mandated that these resources are available? Because we knew 5 years ago that this election was supposed to happen. But then all of a sudden they say they do not have the money, they do not have the funds. Who do you think is sleeping on their job in this regard?
Of course, as you had earlier pointed out, the issue you are comparing the issue of us not being in position to have the money for our elections, yet there are luxurious items that we've seen in the recent past or the few weeks that whose money government has been in position to avail in the shortest time possible. And this, although the issue of the poor planning within government has been re-echoed a number of times, but and a number of times, it's a discussion that has been within the public for a long time, because we all know that when it comes to placing their priorities, it's about the interest, how much money, the interest of government at the time. And so it doesn't come as a shocker to me that government is saying we do not have funds for the elections. It is, to me, I think it's more of the importance that government attaches to these women local level elections, because what what benefit do they bring to the state for a government, a regime that is fighting hard to hold onto power? What are the women councils? What role are they playing on that, on that deal to make sure that they stay? So, and so when you look the poor planning, yes, it is there. It shows that the government has not taken these elections seriously. But on the other hand, you look at the implications that have not having these women elections are going to have, because you look back, you remember it was a while before we had the LC1 elections. There was that power vacuum for a long time. People were saying, now who holds the LC1 stamp and everything. So if the LC1 elections took us that long for us to organize them at last, so what you can imagine what the period it would take us to organize the women council elections, because even the EC is non-committal on the particular date. They are saying until the government avails us funds. And I remember when during the consideration of the budget, the Biabakama told the committee about the issue of organizing women elections. And the attitude I got from the MPs, they didn't seem bothered by the absence of these funds. So it does not surprise me that the issue has been pushed the wall and has come up to this decision. Because as well as he told them we need this amount of money. I remember the MP saying those ones they can line up. They do not need the ballot printing and everything. They just say those ones we shall line up. They can line up. So this is a committee that is processing the budget of parliament, and you hope that, usually when the agencies appear before the committees, they tend to have this attitude that our committee, our mother committee, is going to champion our interests. But if the committee is saying those ones will line up, and I remember Yabakama told them it's not about lining up, but we have to deal with the register and everything. But they still remained on their standpoint that these elections, it will be merely lining up. So the mere fact that the lawmakers handled that issue with that kind of attitude, it does not surprise me. Actually, I was even shocked when the EC was in high gear with these activities. I wondered whether they had received the funds at that time. So I was like, anyway, I'm not part of government. Probably there is somewhere they have received funds that I do not know. And we were in the middle of budget process, so I didn't give it much thought. So, but when the announcement was finally made, that is when the reality hit home, and I realized the issue is bigger than lining up as the MPs had said.
Priska, you mentioned something quite interesting. You say that the MPs didn't seem bothered at all, the MPs that are part of the committee. And I'm wondering if the women members of parliament were present. What was their say about this when they hear the committee saying that they'll just line up? What were the women members of parliament saying?
First of all, Liz, I can tell you that we have not had any reaction from the women members of parliament in the first place, because the women members of parliament have their association named Uganda Women Parliamentary Association. It's called UOPA. And usually when there are issues to do with the women, they usually address a press conference, and this is not something that has come up, and it shows, it even shows the importance we give to these women council elections. As I've told you, you are looking at what impact do they have on the decision making tables. And so if you fail to even if you fail to even raise money for their elections, what is going to happen to the money for their allowances when they are sitting during the council meetings? So these are usually people that we look at as the low levels who can, it's because if you announce that we are not going to hold parliamentary elections, you would see the lawsuits that come up because of the interest, the money that is attached to those parliamentary seats. But I'm not so certain about the amount that these local councils get in terms of allowance, but I imagine it is around 10,000. So there's a person who have around 10,000 have the money to to take a lawsuit and compel government. And you look at even the civil society groups. I've not seen any women group that has come up probably to it is like it is normal to us. So the attitude, as you said, the MPs are people's representatives, so they represent partially the views that are in society. Even partially as journalists, when the MPs said we shall line up, we thought, yes, it is right, we should just line up. But we didn't know the impact that it would have on our democracy lining up. Because although we are having the ballot system and the quality of the election process is being questioned. So imagine the quality that is going to befall if we do the lining up exercise. So I think it's just not the MPs alone, but we as a country, we are all guilty because we've taken it normally. Like I've not seen any angry reaction on in the public about these council elections not being there, because everyone is asking, okay, what impact do they have to my life? So it has been treated normally, and I think it spells doom on the seriousness we attach to our democracy and election process as a whole. We tend to put more emphasis on the presidential and the parliamentary seats. We think those are the epitome of our decision making, and yet these local councils also make some decisions that are critical and they impact on our lives as in our daily lives, that and yet we are sidelining them. So the reaction of the MPs who are the approvers of the budget shows, and it will be a tug of war before these elections are held. Because I gave you an example of the LC ones, because LC ones are crucial leaders in our society, because sometimes when you know you realize the importance of the LC1 when you lose something like the national ID. That is when you start moving around, because there is no a police is going to stamp on the approval society would attach the same importance we attach to parliamentary and presidential to these local council elections also.
Thank you so much, Priska, for your thoughts. Thank you for that. And Abel, it's good to have you back. We thought we had lost you for a moment. And I'm going to bring you in here, and I want you to tell our viewers, what do you think are the grounds that Electoral Commission has for the postponement of this women council elections? Are there any grounds that the EC has to make such a decision?
It depends on the election, because okay, there are certain grounds EC can base on when they are to postpone or suspend elections according to the Electoral Commission Act. Of course, not clearly stipulated that these are the grounds, but they have special powers as the commission to change any program or even an election activity if they deem that there is a mistake, miscalculation, emergency, or there's unforeseen circumstance in the provisions or any activity they are doing, so they can easily make changes within the electoral process. But if we were to look at this very suspension of the Women Council elections based on the lack of funds, availability of funds, I don't see it as a mistake, a miscalculation, or something that was unforeseen, because we need to know that democracy, first of all, is not cheap, it's expensive. So if we accept to move the path of democracy, that means we should each and every time plan for it. We need to avail funds. So Electoral Commission needed about 35 billion Uganda shillings to organize this Women Council and committee elections. And I do know they should have budgeted and submitted their budget to Ministry of Finance. And that money should have been availed by Ministry of Finance. By them turning around and saying they don't have enough money to organize the election, I don't think the power, the provisions in the Electoral Commission Act of them using their special powers to suspend, to suspend this election comes into play. Because if you look at that very section under Part 5 of miscellaneous, it says that where during the course of an election it appears to the Commission that by reason of any mistake, miscalculation, emergency, or unusual or unforeseen circumstances, any of the provisions of this Act or any law relating to the election other than the Constitution does not accord with exigency of the situation, the Commission may, by particular or general instruction, extend the time for doing any act, increase the number of election officers or polling stations, or otherwise adapt any of the provisions as it may be required to achieve the purpose of this act. So they can use their special powers, of course, to extend or postpone an election, but I don't see it coming in terms of lack of funds. Maybe it can be in terms of maybe when we are attacked by a pandemic, they can decide to suspend the election. But telling us that the election has been suspended because the Electoral Commission lacks funds, I think that is an indictment on both the side of Electoral Commission and Minister of Finance, because Electoral Commission needed to first consult with Minister of Finance to confirm are funds available for us to continue with the electoral process. Before even rolling out the roadmap, they should have confirmed whether the funds were there. And also the Minister of Finance, knowing that the Electoral Commission has already rolled out the roadmap, they need to avail the funds. So I don't see any instance for them to suspend these elections further notice, because they have not even clarified when shall they conduct these elections.
Yes, Abel, thank you for that. And I want to keep you on. You mentioned something about releasing the roadmap early this year. That was February. Do you think before they came out to release this roadmap, they had consulted with Ministry of Finance on availability of resources? And if so, did the ministry confirm that these resources were available? Or are we seeing an instance where these agencies are no longer speaking to each other? Could this be an indicator of a growing governance problem in Uganda? Abel, you're muted.
By suspending the election, it clearly shows you that the Minister of Finance and Electoral Commission were not having discussions regarding the availability of funds, because if they had those discussions, the Electoral Commission would not even go ahead to roll out the roadmap because you cannot prepare for something when you know that you cannot be able to finance it. You needed money to be able to carry out all the activities that you, because here they are telling us they have done with the with the display of the registers. They were now preparing for nominations and polling, but now they don't have money. So if they had consulted with the Minister of Finance earlier, and Minister of Finance had assured them that there was money, they would have continued with the process. But if they, it shows what we are seeing now is that they never consulted. They just went ahead with the limited resources maybe they had, and they went ahead and rolled out the roadmap, did the few activities. So now the money ran out. They don't have any other funds. So now they went back to consult whether the money is available. There is no money. So it shows you initially when they rolled out the roadmap, they had limited consultation with Ministry of Finance regarding the finances available for conducting these elections. So that shows you how our institutions currently are not working together in terms of helping each other to implement and achieve what they're supposed to do. So it's a very big gap in our governance and also our institutions, or democratic institutions we have in Uganda here. So it's a question we need to tackle as a country. We need to know that whenever we are planning for something, we need to be able to be ready to do it, because an election is a process. So it's not just an event whereby you just do something once and for all and you leave. We have to move stage by stage. So we don't need to skip any stage if we are to have free and fair elections. So EC needs to always consult with the responsible ministries, the stakeholders it has to engage with. For example, Minister of Finance has to avail them funds so that they can be able to do voter education, to display the voters register, to do the nominations, and also conduct polling days. So if they don't do any kind of consultation with Minister of Finance, and they go ahead and roll out the roadmap without making any consultation whether their funds are available, then the electoral process will be looked at as something that is not free and fair. And Constitution mandates them to conduct free and fair elections.
Thank you, Abel. Thank you so much for that. And Chris, I want to bring you back on. Who just from what Abel has said so far, what do you think is at fault in this scenario? Because Electoral Commission seems to have played its role. They rolled out the roadmap early in the year, and you said the justice was in Parliament asking for this money. So that shows a bit of consultation that was going on, and he was told they should consider lining up. It seems the Electoral Commission was playing their part, but the Ministry of Finance now comes out and says that they have no money. Who is to blame here? So what's going on?
Thanks so much, Lisa. Of course, I think the word that Abel was looking for when he was talking about the lack of consultations between the two government offices is, as one politician said, the uncoordinated movement of troops. So they are at par. They are moving in parallel. So and of course we will logically when the justice announced the postponement of the elections, his main point was the lack of funds. And although Abel has cited the laws and what circumstances under which the Electoral Commission can recall or postpone an election, when it comes to the issue of lack of money, the hands of ECR are tied, because unlike other agencies that are money generating, EC is a consumptive commission. More of it hardly generates money, and it may be saved for the money it collects during the nominations and what. So we are looking at a consumptive ministry commission that has no way out, draws all its money from the consolidated fund, and the people who are operating the fund, the consolidated fund, are saying we don't have money. Of course, they leave Yabakama with no choice but to say, I cannot go on with this process unless the money is availed. And of course, the pronouncement is for the people who are well versed with the matter can know that the issue is like a provocation to try to force the government to act. And of course, when does government take time to act? Usually when there is a public outcry to have these elections held. You can try to twist government to act. But as I've told you earlier on, we seem to be laid back. Life has gone on even with this pronouncement. So that tells you of what the future holds for to be held as a country. And of course, as you asked, the biggest blame lies with the Ministry of Finance, because that is the ministry that is charged with raising revenue and finding resources for the running of government. And them failing to raise the resources, they will also tell you that I'm not collecting enough taxes, I cannot make any other money. So we are going to push this blame to the Minister of Finance, but they're also going to tell you I cannot print money for an election. You see that? And then you're going to remind them of the wastage of expenditure. The pronouncements are going to still be the same. The only issue is we need to go back to the drawing table and we look at the impact these elections, not having these women councils in office is going to have on our democracy and the leadership or the representation of women in Uganda and general leadership at the local level. Because we are coming at the pronouncement comes at a time when government is in high gear to promote the parish development model. Because when you go on social media, you're seeing all these ministers around the place, because understand cabinet has also been postponed, sittings of cabinet, to allow ministers to mobilize for the sensitize the masses of the parish development model. You see that? So right now the parish development model is the main point of focus for government, not the local council elections. And you would imagine, because and this shows you on the planning and the priority, because they are fronting the parish development model, and they think their argument is the parish development model is targeting mostly the youth and women, but aren't these women council members who are the ones who are supposed to sensitize their fellow women at the local levels, at the parish level, and telling them that here we have the parish development model, this is something that we have to champion as in. This is actually, there is no reason as to why a minister should leave attending cabinet to come and sensitize people if we had these women council leaders in place. So it tells you about the misplacement of priorities within the government itself.
Yes, thank you so much, Priska, for that. We're going to go in for a short break and we'll return shortly.
So, Madam MP, I'm so honored to have you on this interview. So, for starters, how does it feel like being an MP? I want you to take me through your scope of work in this office.
Actually, I think this is something better. Why don't I hand over my office to you for something like 2 or 3 days?
That will be perfect, madam.
It will be perfect. So when will you be free?
We can do it now.
Now? I'm going to hand over my office to you for 24 hours.
Okay.
Right. This is a list of the calls I'm expecting today. These are the phones. You make sure you note down everything. Okay.
Have a good day.
Have a good day too.
Yes, please, Officer for MP. Okay. Please, I'll call you back. Hello, Officer for MP. How may I help you? Oh my God. How much? 14. Oh my God. Okay, fine. All right. My God! Is this what she goes through?
Oh, whatever. Thank God you're back. I can't do this anymore. But we agreed for 24 hours. What does that mean? I don't know how you do it. Let me just give it back to you. Have you got enough for your story?
Enough. I got more than what I bargained for. Thank you so much.
Voters redefined the work of an MP. I buy food, I pay for burials, I pay school fees for so many, I pay hospital bills, I buy seeds and donate.
Why? Tell people the bitter truth.
They don't want to know.
Do your job.
Which is?
Make laws, protect the democratic government, oversee the implementation of the government programs.
They don't want to.
When will you ever put service before politics?
Tell voters I'm a politician, not a Rotarian. They should stop that begging culture of theirs.
Stop imposing such overwhelming demands on your MP. The statutory role of an MP is to perform legislation, oversight, budget approval, and representation.
Yes, welcome back everyone from that short break. And before we broke off, we were looking at EC's, the Electoral Commission's postponement of the Women Council elections. And Priska, just right before we had gotten off, you were telling us how little significance is held to these Women Council elections. And I don't know if you're aware, but before 2018, before the previous elections, the Women Council elections, these elections had last been held over 15 years ago. And do you think that it's because these elections are not being taken seriously? The only close comparison that we have to elections that have taken such a gap is the LC1 elections. Why are we seeing this in the women's elections and not any other election, like the general election that happened last year? Why didn't the Ministry of Finance come and say they didn't have money? So when it comes to women, they do not have money. What do you think about this?
Oh, thanks so much, Lisa. And when I remember when we discussed the report that Electoral Commission made on the general elections, they dealt on the subject of the low voter turnout at elections, and one of the issues that was raised was after the holding of the both presidential and the parliamentary, where the voter turn-up was low, the attendance of the voters for the other local council elections was even lower compared to the national one, to the other seats. So, and it tells you of the importance that us as electorates we attach to these elections. Well, but partly it could be the reason to do with the quality of elections. So some people may feel demoralized to go back and participate in another election 1 week or two after the other one. The other whose results are into question, but it also talks, because you imagine you're holding elections, the presidential, you're getting about a day or two off. Then you're going to have the LC5 and the others, then the Women Council. So it's probably the voters are fatigued, but it also tells you of we as I have mentioned several times, we are not giving these local council elections the importance that they deserve. And I personally put the blame on the central government, because we have decentralized in Uganda, and we are looking at all these positions of, we have set up all these local governments to be the mini governments within their respective districts. But we've had instances where Swasati has complained of central government holding onto resources of local governments. You see, and they have cited several examples of some of the you find like a Ministry of Water leaving its offices in Luzira, or its offices in Kampala, to go and construct a borehole in Kapeka, or any other, a local village, something that even a parish chief can oversee. But what are they doing? Why are they doing that? Because they know that if they drive out of Kampala, they are going to sign for per diem. So and that is why usually our wage bills are high, because of the resources that we spend in facilitating. So, and I've hinted of the same example, that why should a minister be right now in Yumbe mobilizing masses about the parish development model, yet we have the local governments. So now business is not taking place in cabinet because the ministers are out there. But remember, we have the cows and RDCs who are supposed to do these jobs, and they are paid to do that. So it is not surprising that the issue of the women council are not being given priority. But of course, when you look at it as a gender lens, the issues of women have not been given priority in the country, even when we talk of the affirmative action and everything. And I also hinted on the issue of the impact uh, the issue of postponing these elections is going to have. Because first of all, the EC has already sunk in money on cleaning up its register, and as you have said that the before 2018 we had spent about 15 years, so we do not know how long that is going to be, because there is no guarantee that they are going to find that money by August and we hold the elections. So that means if the elections are not held by August, it means that this register is discarded. The resources we have spent on this process alone, that is, those are already wasted expend monies. You can imagine if they had been directed to some other activity, what impact it would do. And the other thing is, it is going to impact on the affirmative action, the move by government to try to bring women into decision making and leadership, because we know that most of these local councils are the ones that tend to groom the next leaders. You start as a local council, then you go to a councillor, then some of the women go through all those steps, then you come to mayorship and everything, then perhaps you become an MP or anything. So these elections not being there and the offices being vacant, it is also going to impact on the representation and the training of women into the affirmative action. And it shows you all, even when government is crying about affirmative action, trying to bring on board the women, but there are some decisions that are making that are minimizing their efforts in this road that they are taking.
Thank you, Priska, for that. And Abel, just to pick up from where Priska left it at, our constitution provides for affirmative action, but they tend to be doing the contrary in this instance, because if you're pushing for affirmative action and at the same time you're giving little significance to an election that should be helping women come to the top, what do you have to say about government's contradiction in this case? They want affirmative action, but at the same time they aren't planning for elections that should push for that. What do you have to say about that? And yet, when it's other elections, they have the money for it. What does it say about what government thinks about women elections?
Thank you, Liz. I think for me, the Electoral Commission, Minister of Finance are trying to signal to us that women elections, especially this committee and council elections, are not a priority to this government. Because if they tend to budget or put such elections in a calendar year, and then when the time for organizing them comes, and then you turn around saying there is no money, that already shows you that the elections are not taken as a priority, because they are priorities for other things. You already alluded during your preamble that money is always availed for certain things. For example, we just saw 2.8 billion budgeted for, and they used it for buying luxurious cars. There's money for Operation Shuja and other things. But now when you come to an election for women who are supposed to participate in decision making, and also you're talking about affirmative action and empowering women, they should participate in those decision making bodies, but you've not organized the elections. Then you ask yourself, what is the government up to? Maybe they're not up to empowering women. We just have it by say, but practically nothing is seen. So I do agree with Priska that maybe the government does not prioritize women elections, and they look at it as something very minor. So they are not interested in empowering a big number of women. They just want a few whom they can work with and manipulate and do other things, but they don't want a large movement of women being in leadership. So they make sure that they keep postponing some of the things. For example, you alluded to the fact that, first of all, this election was not held for about 15 years until again around 2018. Now we are seeing the same thing being done. So they will tell you they are postponing this election until further notice. So you don't know when. Maybe it will again take about 15 years. So I think government needs to evaluate themselves and start looking at women as one of the actors that are so important for our development as a country, and they should participate. All their processes they're meant to participate in, they should respect them and they participate in those processes, so that we can have their voices heard in the decision-making processes.
Thank you, Abel. And I want to keep you on there. Priska earlier said that we're talking about the stakeholders that we have seen come up so far, and I think I've only seen political parties, but we haven't seen women-led organizations come up to push for these elections. Neither have we seen the women representatives in parliament, because I'm assuming they work through these councils and committees to get voices of women coming from ground. Why aren't the women who should be concerned about this coming up to say something? Because if we went 15 years without having that election and nothing happened, and then now we could see a possibility of the same happening, why aren't they coming up?
There is always a saying most people like using, women are the biggest obstacle to their fellow women. So you never know, they are looking at these other women who are coming up from the Women Council as challengers to some of their positions. No, like for example, we have women who have been stuck to that affirmative action of district woman MP for very many years, and they don't want to leave and upgrade and go and contest on a direct seat. So for them, I think this works towards their interest, because once you have women elected and they are seen in society doing a lot of work, which is good for the society or the community they are in, they become a threat to those ones who are already in top positions. So the reason some of them are also quiet, they are comfortable in the positions they are in. So they look at these ones who are coming from down as a threat to their stay in their political positions. So some of them may not be interested in talking about these things because it's for their own political benefit. When they come out, speak about it, these people will be elected. They do a lot of work. Some of them will go and campaign them, and they don't return to those seats. And also, you talked about some of the civil society organizations, that women-led organizations. You know, right now, most of civil society right now is in a state whereby not all can come out and speak. Some of them fear, because the regime in place has already unleashed its terror on some of them. So they fear to speak out on certain things. They look at everything the way they are, and then they just ignore it like that.
Well, that's absurd. Thank you, Abel. Priska, so in the letter that was issued by the Electoral Commission, Justice Vyawakama appealed to political parties and organizations and the aspiring candidates to remain calm as the matter of the additional funding requirements is being handled. But we know that these candidates have already spent a lot and they are probably going to face financial loss, having already spent massively on preparing the candidates. Some of them have started campaigning and other expenses that come with campaigns in a highly commercialized political environment in Uganda. What do you have to say about this? What happens to these candidates? Because if at all the elections are rescheduled, they will have to start afresh from ground. Because voters easily forget. So what's your say on this?
Thanks so much, Lisa. And that is what I told you of the effect, the impact that the postponement is going to have. Because why we may look at the side of government, the money that the EC has already spent, we are also the individuals. Because I know Noop came out and hinted on the money that they already spent in preparing their candidates. So I do not know whether the EC put into consideration of all these effects that is going to have both on the individual and national and political party level. But it's something that I'm not so sure if the EC even bothered to bring on table the other political parties to consult them on this issue before that decision was taken or the pronouncement was made. And if that was if such a decision was made without the consultation, without holding a meeting with the parties and telling them, this is what we have at the moment, because I think it was one of the decent things to do. But when you're reading from the reactions from Noop, they must have also been taken by surprise. And it indicates that the political parties, as the key stakeholders, were not consulted on this matter. And when the statement that Abel made on women being enemies of fellow women, I mean, we know the people who are holding these offices. The accountant general is a male, the minister of finance is a male, the PS is a male. So what I wonder what role that the women have had, because they have told you the finances are not there. The person who is supposed to collect taxes is a male. So I wonder why you're dragging in women as being the enemies, because for you, and when you talk of people, the women not being silent, Lisa is not silent in the first place. She's the. I'm very sure she's key on coming up with this topic. But as I see that time is running out, this whole thing, I must admit that even when I came to when the pronouncement was made on the postponement, I didn't give it much thought. But when I was doing some reading, and it dawned on me the impact these not postponing these elections are going to have. And I just need Ugandans to kind of give importance to these local leaders, these elections of local leaders, because we might think that most of the decisions are made in cabinet and state house, and as well as parliament, but there are many decisions that are made at our district councils that impact on us directly. And it is time we started giving these local councils the importance that they deserve, because we all accepted that we should go in, we should embrace decentralization. We should have mini government. We should not be the same people who are undermining decentralization process in government, because it is decentralization is critical to the transformation of our country. I will I just don't want to us to attach the value of these electoral seats on what money the candidates are going to give us, because we know that an MP probably can give you a scholarship, while and you look at, okay, what is the LC1 going to do to me anyway? But we should drop that attitude, and we give all these offices the respect they deserve, that they are all political leaders, and each decision they make is going to impact. We should not just look at the decisions made probably on the taxes and we say those are enough. We should give a lot of support to these local governments if we want services to trickle down, because it is something that Henry alluded to, I think, last week, on the money that the budget that local governments receive, vis-a-vis a big chunk of it, about 60 or 70% of it going on a payment of salaries, and only 30 being taken back to the communities. You see that? So if the decentralization process is going to take place, it is the same, it's upon the same arrangement that we are relying on for the success of the parish development model. And I tend to think, even as government, we should let the institutions work. If we have said that we are going to decentralize, let's decentralize. The only thing, because now you have suspended cabinet, now the ministers are out there in the field. We tend to, as human beings, we tend to embrace the people who look like us, the LC ones, the people that we know, that we go in the same drinking place, we fetch water from the same borehole. So you have fronted the ministers as the owners of the parish development model, but you want the LC ones or the parish chiefs to implement the parish development model, yet they are nowhere to be seen in the what? In the sensitization process. So, and you look at even the local council women, you have left them out. You're driving people from Kampala, and you're spending fuel, and most of these ministers have security detail who are getting allowances. So all that money that is being spent on,
Priska, maybe as you wind up, we are running short of time. Maybe as you
so
wind up.
so you imagine what impact the money that, because Abel talked about 35 billion that the EC needed, and the 22 billion that was spent on the MPs for parish development model. So I think it is time that we gave these local council elections that the importance that they do deserve.
Thank you so much, Priska, for those final words. And Abel, maybe as we close the show, you could give the viewers your final remarks on this topic, today's topic.
First of all, I would like to make it clear that Priska, I was saying that women, Lisa asked me why women are not coming out to speak about, most women are not coming out to speak about this issue, especially also in leadership. That's why I said there are some people who sometimes say that women are enemies to their fellow women, because clearly we see there are very big women in top positions in this government. Look at the vice president, the prime minister, the speaker. The list is too long and endless. By now, they would have called Minister of Finance to explain even to Parliament why they have not allocated money or why they have not released money to Electoral Commission to hold women elections, but they're silent. That's why I was saying they are comfortable in their positions, so they don't care about these other lower positions. Because the more they empower these ones in the lower positions, they become a threat to their state in those positions. So that's why some people regard them as enemies to their fellow women. So for me, in my concluding remarks, I would like to say, you see, an election is not just an event; it's a process, and we need to follow each and every process if we are to organize a free and fair electoral process. But now you find that in Uganda, for example, let's base on this very women council elections. You've rolled out a roadmap. You've done voter registration. You've adjusted the voter register. You've not done the nomination. You've now cancelled the election. So if you jump a stage and you want to conduct a really free and fair elections, is that really possible in this context of Uganda? So I think the government does not prioritize the selection of women, and if they think it's not important to their own benefit or to the way they look at it, let them come out clearly and tell the public that the Women Council and committee elections are irrelevant. Let them come out clearly, but they should not beat around the bush and tell us there is no money for conducting this election. Because if you look at, I read for you the provision in the Electoral Commission Act, which allows the Electoral Commission to either push an election forward, but on this case, you cannot put the lack of finances as one of the issues because it's not an emergency. It was not something that was unforeseen because they budgeted for it. They gave Minister of Finance a budget that we need 35 billion to conduct this election. Minister of Finance knew that from June 2022 to August 2022, Electoral Commission is supposed to hold women council and committee elections. So they knew very well that money was supposed to be availed. So why did they avail something little, which could only make Electoral Commission do other processes? And then after some time, when the process for nomination and conducting polls arrives, there is no money. So that shows you that government does not prioritize some of the things like women council elections. So they need to just come out clearly and tell the public these elections are not relevant to the country. And Ugandans know about it. So it's now the women to know whether to back such a government or to just say this government does not consider us as important citizens in this country. That is my concluding remark.
Thank you, Abel. Thank you, Priska. It's been an amazing show. It's been an interesting discussion. And it's unfortunate that these elections have been postponed, especially at a time like this. We hope as Uganda, we won't take 15 more years like in the previous time to have this election once again. And as ACFIM, we're so grateful to all our viewers that took time to tune into today's show. And remember, this show runs every Wednesday from 11 to midday. And we hope to see you next week, same place, same time. Keep safe.